King Charles has set the stage for one of the most dramatic royal shakeups in recent memory, declaring a decision that has stunned both the palace and the public. In an unprecedented move, he has stripped Camilla of her Queen Consort title, rewriting the rules of succession and sparking intense debate across the world. This shocking announcement has left royal insiders scrambling and observers questioning what comes next for the monarchy's fragile unity. Could this mark a turning point in royal history? Stay tuned for the full story. Charles strips Camilla of her Queen Consort title. It began with an urgent summons that jolted Buckingham Palace into silence. Guards locked the corridors, phones were confiscated, and the most powerful names in the monarchy were told to assemble without delay. Those who entered the chamber that day sensed immediately that this was no ordinary gathering. It was the kind of moment that could rewrite royal history. Within hours, King Charles III delivered the words that would stun his family, his nation, and the world. Camilla would no longer hold the title of Queen Consort. The announcement hit like a thunderclap, and yet, for insiders, the decision had been quietly brewing for months. Behind the glittering facade of royal life, tensions had been swelling, whispers of political scheming, questions of loyalty, and claims that Camilla had been pushing an agenda that clashed with the very heart of the crown. To the outside world, the monarchy carried on with its usual pageantry, but behind those gilded doors, the pressure was mounting, and something had to break. Those summoned to the emergency meeting included Princess Anne and Prince William, figures whose voices carry extraordinary weight in matters of succession and royal duty. They entered a hidden chamber deep inside the palace, a space rarely used, except for affairs so sensitive they rarely surface in public memory. The atmosphere inside was suffocating. Senior advisors shifted nervously, while others were stripped of their positions before the meeting was even halfway through. One aide, speaking later under strict anonymity, confessed that the sudden dismissals felt like a purge, swift, chilling, and irreversible. Then Camilla arrived. Witnesses recall her walking toward the chamber with remarkable composure, her chin raised, her expression unreadable. For decades, she had endured relentless scrutiny, from the storms of public outrage in the 1990s to the cold stares that followed her into her marriage with Charles. She had long since mastered the art of appearing untouchable. Many believed she carried that same resilience into this gathering, assuming whatever storm awaited would be weathered side by side with her husband. But the decision that came was unlike anything she, or anyone else, expected. Without warning, Charles announced the removal of her crown's highest title. It wasn't softened with ceremony or framed as a temporary adjustment. It was final. The words echoed through the chamber like a decree from another age, leaving even seasoned palace officials struggling to process what they had just heard.
I have to admit, in the end, I ended up probably being a sort of pony-mad child.
The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by hurried whispers that swept the room like wildfire. To some, the scene felt less like a family confrontation and more like a constitutional turning point. This wasn't scandal as usual. It was something darker, a moment that seemed to fracture the House of Windsor at its core. Even those hardened by years of palace drama admitted privately that they had never witnessed anything like it. Beyond the locked doors, word of the king's decision began leaking almost instantly. By the time the first reports reached the public, shockwaves were already coursing through the Commonwealth. Commentators rushed to call it the most significant crisis since the tragic loss of Diana in 1997. For many, the parallels were impossible to ignore. Another moment where the monarchy seemed caught in a storm of its own making. What remains clear is that this was not a decision made in haste. It was the culmination of long-brewing tensions, bitter disputes, and a king who finally chose to act. Inside Buckingham Palace, the fallout is only beginning, and the question on everyone's mind is how far the ripple effects of this historic move will spread. So don't blink. You'll want to know just how far this storm spreads. the night Charles ended Camilla's reign. The chamber was suffocating, not because of noise, but because of its silence. Every face around the long, polished table seemed carved from stone, drained of warmth, drained of allegiance. It wasn't a council of equals, nor a family gathering. It was a tribunal. What Camilla did not know as she stepped through the doors with her usual composure was that her fate had already been sealed long before she arrived. King Charles was the first to shatter the quiet. Those present described his hands trembling, not from weakness, but from the sheer intensity of what was about to unfold. His voice, however, carried no trace of hesitation. It cut through the air, sharp and commanding, unlike anything his advisors or family had heard from him before. He didn't linger on pleasantries or ceremony. He had come with a single purpose, and every word he spoke struck with the weight of finality. The monarchy, he reminded them, was more than titles and crowns. It was a bond of duty, of loyalty, a sacred thread tying sovereign to people. That bond, he declared, had been threatened. And then his eyes fell directly upon Camilla. The words, Queen Consort,
I've been actually trying to keep quiet about reaching 3/4 of a century.
left his lips not as an honor but as an accusation, as if the title itself had soured in his mouth. What followed was nothing short of explosive. Witnesses recall his tone laced with fury, his words delivered like indictments in a trial. He spoke of betrayal, of ambitions that crossed boundaries no consort should ever dare to cross, of actions that destabilized the trust upon which the crown rests. One by one, the accusations built into a storm, until finally his voice thundered with the proclamation that ended the silence forever. "The title comes to an end today!" The chamber erupted with gasps. Advisors who had sat rigidly still now fidgeted nervously, eyes cast downward, too fearful to meet his gaze. It was the kind of moment that dissolved order in an instant, leaving chaos in its wake. For Camilla, the mask of icy calm she had carried inside began to fracture. Decades of resilience, of surviving ridicule and clawing her way toward legitimacy, seemed to collapse all at once. Her face drained of color, her eyes widened in disbelief. The crown she had fought so long to hold had been ripped away with a single sentence. Yet Charles's words were not the only ones that cut her down.
Everything that nature provides, and also not understanding or having been somehow trained to believe.
Princess Anne, seated with the steely composure of someone who had lived her entire life under the shadow of unyielding duty, finally spoke. Her voice was steady, almost eerily calm, but it carried the kind of weight that allowed no rebuttal. She looked directly at Camilla and delivered only 2 words. "It's time." No speech, no elaboration, just a final dismissal that resonated louder than any lengthy condemnation. Prince William's silence, meanwhile, spoke just as loudly. He never uttered a word, but his clenched jaw and piercing stare revealed exactly where he stood. His presence beside his father was more than symbolic. It was confirmation that the next heir aligned firmly with the king's decision. For those watching, it signaled unity at the very top of the monarchy, a wall of resolve against Camilla's position. By the time the meeting reached its end, the room no longer carried whispers but the roar of inevitability. The icy silence had given way to a storm of murmurs, the weight of history pressing against the chamber walls. Sources later revealed that intelligence files and confidential memos had been circulating for months, documenting Camilla's alleged overreach, reports suggesting patterns of behavior that stretched far beyond the accepted role of a consort. To Charles, these dossiers were not speculation, but proof, evidence of ambition that threatened to undermine both crown and country. And so, what began as a meeting cloaked in secrecy transformed into a royal reckoning. Charles had spoken, and in that instant, the course of Camilla's royal standing was altered forever. The consort who spoke too loudly. At first, no one paid much attention when Camilla began to linger in conversations that were meant for the king alone. A question slipped in here, an observation made there. It was easy to dismiss as natural curiosity. Yet those brief interjections soon grew into full arguments, her voice carrying in rooms where tradition demanded silence. Palace staff who had long learned the art of discretion began to exchange wary glances, sensing that something more than companionship was unfolding at the side of the monarch. The whispers that followed were not about gowns or garden parties, but about influence. Her patronages, once seen as routine, appeared to align a little too neatly with personal interests, and her unusually active hand in shaping foreign visits raised eyebrows. The talk grew darker when word spread that she was attending private gatherings with senior politicians and London's most powerful figures, meetings that bore none of the ceremonial polish of official duty. These encounters, according to insiders, were never recorded in schedules, nor did the king himself seem fully aware of their scope. What unsettled many wasn't simply that these meetings took place, but what they implied: private negotiations, whispered bargains, and unspoken promises of royal access. If true, such dealings blurred the most sacred boundary of the monarchy, a line carefully drawn over centuries to keep the crown hovering above politics rather than drowning in it. Former aides described her demeanor as shifting from that of a supportive partner to something closer to a co-ruler. She reportedly analyzed government policies, critiqued strategies, and even pressed her opinions into discussions that had historically been reserved for the sovereign alone. The change, they insisted, was striking, an evolution from companion to contender for authority. Dr. Alastair Finch, one of Britain's most respected constitutional historians, captured the danger with sobering clarity. The monarchy, he explained, has endured precisely because it stayed outside the brutal theater of politics. The moment a royal, especially one unelected and bound only by ceremony, appears to meddle in governance, the entire institution's legitimacy trembles. Even rumors alone, he warned, could wound the crown in ways no scandal of personal conduct ever could. And so the whispers no longer sounded harmless. They gathered weight, circling through corridors like thunder before a storm, carrying with them a single, unsettling question: how much power had really shifted into the hands of the consort? Keep watching to find out. Shadows over the crown. Charles had grown used to palace gossip, the endless swirl of rumors that seemed to follow the monarchy wherever it went. But these whispers carried a weight that was harder to ignore. Advisors began pulling threads together, and before long, a troubling pattern emerged. Camilla was no longer being spoken of as a supportive consort, but as someone quietly reshaping the monarchy itself. The suggestion that power was being exercised in her shadow filled the king with dread. This unease was more than political maneuvering. It was personal, striking at the very heart of the crown. Charles had waited decades for the throne, only to find himself facing the possibility that its foundations were being undermined by the woman closest to him. And haunting it all was the specter of Diana, whose memory remained unshakable. For the public, Diana had never truly left. Her death in 1997 froze her in the nation's heart as the eternal people's princess, warm, open, and untouchable in legacy. Camilla, by contrast, bore the label of outsider, the woman who had intruded upon a story that belonged to someone else. No matter how many years passed, the comparison lingered, and every rumor tied to Camilla only reignited old wounds. To the king, this was a storm with no clear escape. Every revelation about Camilla's alleged overreach brought with it the reminder that Diana's shadow still loomed over the monarchy, shaping public opinion as powerfully as any proclamation.
Jamie, he loves his koala bear he's got.
The nation had crowned Charles, but in the hearts of millions, Diana's presence remained the truer symbol of royalty. Against that enduring legacy, Camilla's place seemed fragile, and the monarchy itself stood exposed to doubts that cut deeper than politics. They struck at trust, history, and the survival of the crown itself. A crown divided. Charles has shocked the monarchy with a move that no one thought possible. In a stunning twist that has left courtiers unsettled and the public divided, he has declared a palace showdown by stripping Camilla of the Queen Consort title. This decision, as dramatic as it is unprecedented, has turned the royal household into the center of global attention. The gravity of this choice stretches far beyond ceremonial titles. It signals a deep shift in power and intention, reshaping the monarchy's future in ways few could have imagined. The announcement came like a lightning strike, piercing through the careful calm that the palace often tries to project.
Queen Camilla will be crowned.
Camilla, who for years worked tirelessly to earn acceptance after a controversial entry into royal life, suddenly finds herself at the center of a storm she cannot control. Her public role, once secured by the late Queen Elizabeth II's blessing, has been stripped away in a single command from her husband, sending shockwaves across the United Kingdom and far beyond. For decades, Camilla's journey was one of reinvention. From the shadows of scandal to the spotlight of royal duty, she weathered public criticism and carved out a space as Charles's steadfast partner. To many, her elevation to Queen Consort last year represented a final chapter of redemption, a symbol that the royal family had moved past old wounds. But with this latest turn, that chapter has been torn from the story, replaced with uncertainty and whispers of palace rivalries that threaten the fragile unity of the crown. Observers are left questioning Charles's true motives. Was this a calculated move to reinforce his own authority in the face of growing pressures from within and outside the monarchy? Or is it a personal reckoning, one that reopens the wounds of the past and reflects the deep tension between tradition, duty, and personal loyalty? What is clear is that such a move risks reigniting public divides and reshaping the balance of power within the royal household. Around the world, reactions are pouring in. Some hail the king's boldness, others criticize the instability it may bring. With the monarchy already under scrutiny, the fallout from this decision could define Charles's reign for years to come. The palace corridors have rarely echoed with such tension, and every glance, whisper, and appearance now carries the weight of this historic shift. But how did King Charles's closest circle respond to this bold move? Let's find out. The voices that shaped the crown. Princess Anne, known for her blunt honesty, never softened her words when duty to the crown was at stake. In hushed but unwavering tones, she reminded her brother of a reality no monarch could ignore. The throne existed for the people, not for personal comfort. It was a reminder Charles could not easily dismiss, for it pierced the heart of his dilemma. But the counsel that carried the heaviest weight came not from seasoned courtiers or advisors, but from his own son. Prince William, steady and deliberate, spoke to his father in moments away from the public gaze. He did not veil his concern with courtesy. Instead, he pressed a point that cut deeper than politics. The monarchy's survival was inseparable from the memory of Diana. To disregard that bond, he warned, was to gamble with the very foundation of the institution itself.
But I can't always wear what I'd like to on engagement because it's just not practical.
Diana's image had grown larger than life since her passing, woven into the very identity of modern royalty. Her warmth, her compassion, her connection with ordinary people, these qualities had not faded with time, but had become the standard by which every royal was measured. William understood this better than anyone, for he carried both her legacy and the weight of the future crown. He made it clear that defending Camilla's contested role risked alienating the very generation that still revered his mother. Anne's pragmatism and William's urgency converged into an unmistakable message. The monarchy could not afford sentiment when its stability was at stake. For Charles, it was not only the voice of a sister urging duty, nor a son appealing to history, but a tightening circle of truth that left little room to maneuver. The hidden blueprint for power. Inside the gilded halls of Buckingham Palace, silence often hides the deepest storms. That silence shattered when King Charles was handed a confidential dossier, its contents so alarming that it threatened to unravel the crown itself. The file, assembled in secret by senior aides, carried with it whispers of a carefully constructed plan, one that accused Camilla of working to weave her own bloodline into the monarchy's foundations. This was no ordinary palace intrigue. It read like the blueprint of a dynasty designed to rival the Windsors. The dossier, according to sources, contained a mosaic of evidence, private correspondence, sensitive financial documents, and testimonies from trusted members of the royal household. Together, they painted the image of a queen consort whose ambitions extended far beyond ceremonial duty. At the heart of it were her children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes. The revelation suggested she had lobbied behind the scenes for Tom to gain discreet influence over select royal estates, and for Laura to receive ceremonial honors that would elevate her status almost to the level of the king's own nieces. What appeared in routine paperwork sent for Charles's signature, mundane approvals buried in the flood of state documents, was said to be the careful layering of measures that, once complete, could secure her family's future inside the institution forever. When the contents reached Prince William, the reaction was explosive. To him, this wasn't merely about influence or titles. It was nothing less than an attempt to erase his mother's memory. Diana's legacy had long been tied to the survival of the monarchy itself, and William viewed any challenge to that as intolerable. Reports described him confronting his father with fury, accusing Camilla of betrayal on a scale that endangered not just the crown, but the unity of the family. His outrage ignited a rare moment of solidarity within the royal household. Long-standing divisions fell silent, replaced by a collective understanding that something larger was at stake. For the first time in years, members of the family aligned, not in defense of tradition alone, but against the specter of a parallel dynasty rising within their walls. For Charles, the pressure reached breaking point. The matter could no longer be softened as a personal dispute between his wife and the institution. It had sharpened into a choice between safeguarding the monarchy's survival or allowing Camilla's ambitions to take root.
I've been actually trying to keep quiet about reaching 3/4 of a century.
When his decision became known, the illusion of stability collapsed. Camilla, once central to the crown's daily life, found herself in near-total isolation. Sources spoke of her heartbreak, her disbelief that after decades of loyalty and sacrifice, she would face such a public and devastating reversal, an outcome she had never imagined possible. But was Charles protecting the monarchy or tearing open wounds it could never heal? Stay with us. The public's reaction tells its own story. A kingdom divided. Beyond the gates of Buckingham Palace, the air was thick with division. The king's decision, meant to steady the monarchy, instead unleashed a storm unlike any in recent memory. Crowds surged into public squares while social media lit up with furious debate. Supporters of Diana, their loyalty unshaken even decades after her death, hailed the move as long-awaited justice. One widely shared post captured the mood. The true queen has finally been avenged. To them, Camilla's fall was not a tragedy, but a reckoning, the closing of a chapter that had haunted the crown since the 1990s. But where Diana's admirers rejoiced, Camilla's defenders erupted in outrage. Though fewer in number, their voices were no less fierce. They branded the decision a betrayal, accusing Charles of sacrificing his wife to preserve a faltering reign. To these loyalists, the king was not a man of courage, but of cowardice, bending under the weight of public opinion. The contrast was striking, one side jubilant in triumph, the other seething with resentment. The press wasted no time amplifying the chaos. Headlines screamed across the morning papers, "Queen no more," while television networks replayed the same images on a relentless loop. Panels of experts, historians, and former courtiers debated endlessly, each word dissected by a nation desperate for answers. A war of narratives erupted. Diana's legacy, glowing brighter than ever, clashed with Camilla's downfall, cast alternately as deserved punishment or as political execution. And in the center stood Charles, lonelier than at any point in his reign. To some, he embodied resolve, a monarch finally willing to make the painful choices necessary to safeguard the institution. To others, he was pitiable, an aging ruler, frail and indecisive, who had turned his back on the woman who had stood beside him for decades. The very crown he had spent his life defending now seemed heavier than ever, pressing down with a weight no victory could lighten. In stark contrast, the Prince and Princess of Wales emerged untouched, their silence a shield that turned scandal into strength. William and Catherine did not need to speak, their composure alone reassured the public. Where Camilla faltered, they appeared steady. Where Charles looked fractured, they seemed whole. For many, this was the quiet coronation, the moment the nation's heart shifted fully to the next generation. Diana's spirit seemed to live on in them, reshaping the monarchy into something modern and resilient. Inside the palace, another unprecedented task had begun: the erasure of a Queen Consort. There was no protocol, no guide for dismantling a royal identity while the world watched. Each step, carried out in the blinding glare of history, marked a rewriting of tradition in real time. But here is the question: how do you erase a queen in full view of the world? And what secrets vanish with her? Stay tuned. The vanishing of a queen. The moment seemed almost surreal. Hours before the nation would hear the thunderclap of a royal decree, she had stepped out onto the balcony of Buckingham Palace. Standing beside the king, dressed in full regalia, she looked every inch the queen. Yet the silence that greeted her was chilling.
Can turn the nourishment of the body into a painful attack on themselves.
The crowd did not cheer as expected. It watched in uneasy quiet. Her smile faltered, her hand raised in a hesitant wave, and in that instant, the grandeur of monarchy felt more like a carefully staged farewell. No one knew it then, but that appearance was already history, her last as queen. Behind the palace walls, events were unfolding with the precision of a ritual undoing. Royal staff moved swiftly but discreetly, as if cleansing the monarchy of a presence it no longer wished to acknowledge. Her portraits, once unveiled with pomp and pride, were quietly removed and sent into storage alongside the disgraced figures of the past. Official websites were updated in silence. Her name struck through, as if it had never been there at all. Even her personal cipher, CR, Camilla Regina, soon to be engraved upon documents and seals, was erased as though it had become a stain. The order itself bore the king's trembling signature, but its weight was staggering. Was this truly an act of necessity, or a dangerous reach for absolute power in a modern constitutional age? Legal scholars were left scrambling for words. Dr. Finch observed that no precedent existed for such an act, a sovereign stripping his own spouse of a title conferred at accession. Legally, she remained his wife. Symbolically and constitutionally, she had been erased. The contradictions left the nation uneasy, wondering if the monarchy had crossed into uncharted territory. For the institution, this was more than the removal of a crown. It was the careful construction of a symbolic death, the deliberate dismantling of an identity that had, for a fleeting moment, claimed permanence. What had been a triumph was now treated like contamination, scrubbed from sight in a manner both cold and methodical. The monarchy appeared to be performing an exorcism, expelling her image from its very core. And yet, even as officials carried out their work, the larger question loomed. Was this an attempt to preserve the throne, or a desperate act that revealed its fragility? By erasing one queen, the monarchy itself seemed to fracture, exposing fissures within the royal family and across the kingdom. Camilla's place in history now hangs in suspension, not erased completely, but transformed into a haunting reminder of how easily power can be given, and just as easily taken away. So what do you think? Was the Queen's vanishing a bold move to protect the crown, or a dangerous step into uncharted territory? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe.